Hello, global gardeners. It's Monday. Let's talk some gardening. Now, I've been having terribly cold weather. Most of you know that. I still have snow on the ground. I thought it might be fun to throw in a different perspective, particularly for you that might be living in a warm area. So let's invite Scott Head from the Scott Head YouTube channel, who lives in a completely different region than mine. Nice to have you here today, Scott.
Glad to be here, Scott.
And so, Scott, I'm the Scott that lives in Colorado. You're the Scott that lives in southern Texas. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your garden and where you're at if they're not familiar with you?
I live in Friendswood, Texas, which is a tiny little town in between Houston and Galveston. And I'm in Zone 9A, almost Zone 9B. There's a little strip along the coast that keeps the heat from the Gulf of Mexico. I have a little backyard suburban garden, a very tiny garden. And I primarily just use my garden as a teaching garden. And Raised beds, container gardening, micro orchard, micro vineyard. And I've crammed all this stuff into a quarter-acre lot and have been doing pretty good over the past 10 years in this property. And last couple of years, we've been having lots of challenges, but I view challenges as an opportunity to teach and to show what can happen and how to overcome it. So grow primarily, typical vegetables and trying some new things, trying to grow apples in the subtropics, and so far so good.
Wow.
There's a lot of stuff we can grow here. Generally, we can grow year round. We get 3 distinct gardens. We get a spring garden beginning about right now. We get a summer garden, which can tolerate, plant things that can tolerate the heat. And I can usually grow a long fall/winter garden that brings me from about mid-October all the way up until the 1st of March. And
Okay.
that's usually my favorite gardening time. The past few years, it's been the most challenging gardening time. We just had a pretty epic freeze this year, which knocked pretty much everything back. So
Yeah.
it's been a challenge.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I love your channel. I've been following you for years, of course, and I like to talk you up every opportunity that I get
Thank
during
you.
the live stream. So I know a lot of the viewers are either already following you or familiar with you, because you haven't hidden that adversity. I mean, there are so many of the YouTube gardeners who just live in paradise, and
Yeah.
it's the same every single week. I show when my garden gets damaged by hail. I show all of the dead plants. And I think you even take it to another level beyond that, because I'm used to the hail and I'm used to the cold and I'm used to the damage. But it's been quite a surprise for you. And that's what I see in your videos. It's just the shock and how you deal with it. And so I do want to commend you, because you haven't hidden that at all
Thank
from
you.
your viewers, and you are making it educational.
Yeah, I don't see any reason to hide anything. I mean, that's how we learn, right? I mean, if you just show the perfect, beautiful garden, how's anybody going to learn when they get a infestation of insects that wipes everything out? People get discouraged and think, well, I'm obviously not a good gardener. I've got a black thumb. Everything dies for me, and it's not like the people on YouTube where everything goes well. Um,
Yeah.
I think if you show, like last summer, I had we've had a challenging year, both in the weather, but also personally in our family. We had some real heavy tragedies this year that came along,
Oh, sorry to
and
hear that.
those kind of tragedies take you away from gardening. And we had that happen over the summer. And I won't go into the tragedy, but let's just say that it's pretty heavy. And so my garden beds became infested with weeds because I wasn't able to stay on top of it. Well, I got to show that, that's a challenge that happens to people. Tragedy happens. You aren't able to garden. How do you overcome it? What do you do? And are you a failure as a gardener because you have 3 foot tall weeds in your tomato bed? No, you're not a failure. You go out
That's
there and
right.
you deal with it. You go out there and I had a variety of tomato that didn't mind the weed competition and still produced tons of cherry tomatoes. But I wasn't able to get them trellised like I wanted, so I just let them sprawl. I wasn't able to keep on top of the weeds. Well, okay, I just went and harvested tomatoes amongst the weeds, um, and we pressed on. We still got fruit from the garden, and well, we had an opportunity to, as a YouTuber. Then I had an opportunity to show, here's what you do when you have a weed
Exactly.
bound bed. So I like to tell my wife, that um, tragedy is an opportunity for a video.
It's funny that you say that. I often rewrite my plan of what videos I'm going to do when something like that happens.
Yeah, you have to. It's reality. It's the truth. I want to
Yeah.
present. I think gardener YouTubers should present their gardens honestly and with integrity and with truth, and to show. I want to see what someone does when they get some weird pest that they've never seen comes in. How do you deal with that? What do they do? How do they overcome? Because that teaches me then what I need to do when I face that same problem.
Yeah.
Um, I discovered one year a beautiful moth that was amongst my grapevines. It looked um, almost like a wasp. It was black and had a red thorax. And I
Hmm.
thought, wow, that's an interesting critter I've never seen before. Turns out it was the grapevine skeletonizer moth, and it had laid eggs all in my muscadine grapes. And within a week, half of the foliage in that muscadine vineyard was destroyed, and I'd never
Oh
seen
wow.
this before. Um, well, that was an opportunity then, and I had to act fast because they were decimating those vines, and I was able to treat and eradicate those caterpillars, and did get a harvest. They left me enough foliage to ripen up the grapes.
Oh
Uh,
good.
but I thought, okay, well, the way I learned about it was I got on YouTube, and I was like, what is this bug, And somebody had been honest enough to show their decimated vineyard, a commercial operation, had been decimated within a week.
Oh,
And so then I knew. Well, come the next year, there they were again. Now they're here. I don't know if they overwinter in the soil or how they, but they're here now. So that's something that I've learned, and now I can anticipate and be ready for it.
yeah.
But show it, and I think that's good. I think we have to show those kind of things.
Yeah, I completely agree. Quick shout out and thank you to Pat Patrick for that super chat. Thanks for a double header, fantastic duo. And I agree, this is a fantastic duo. I always like having you on the show. It's been a little bit too long. I want to ask a little bit more about what you're doing to overcome some of those issues. But first, let's talk about the single seed
Okay.
challenge. The first time I had you on the show, and I think one of the things that really got us to know each other was that single seed
Hmm.
challenge, and that may be what you're most well known for on YouTube as you're getting more and more famous for things like the the videos that I think are always incredible that you're doing. Go ahead and talk about the single seed challenge.
Okay. Yeah, it's ironic actually that before I get to the single challenge, um, my most successful video that I have ever done is not even a gardening video. It's a making sauerkraut video. Some reason that ticked off this year, and yeah, that's the one that's kind of carrying the channel right now. But the single seed challenge, this is what, the fourth year? I think it's the fourth year we've done this. Um, so when you look at your garden, when you buy a pack of seeds and you go and plant your gardens, we tend to think as gardeners of, that's my tomato bed, that's my onion crop, that's the plot, and you don't
Yeah,
really usually hone in on one single plant. And I think there's so much beauty and amazing potential in a seed and in a plant and in the process of that plant's life, um, that it pays to slow down and appreciate a single plant for what it is, to appreciate that single little seed and the potential that's stored up in there, and the genetics that are all in that little dry package that you get. And so the single seed challenge is a way for gardeners to challenge themselves to slow down and to appreciate the life of a plant from seed to end of life. And so what I have been trying to encourage folks to do is to take a single seed, to single one out, just one, um, and sow that seed, planted in a pot, outdoors, wherever, it doesn't matter, and kind of baby that plant along and focus on that. And what we do as gardeners on YouTube is share that seed with other gardeners using the hashtag Single Seed Challenge 2023. That way we can go and appreciate everyone else's single seed challenge. But the idea is that we treat that one plant as the beautiful plant that it is. And
Hmm.
I think it's real rewarding when you get that seed up and you nurture it along and you see its entire life cycle from seed to fruit, if it's a vegetable, to flowering, if it's an ornamental, to whatever it is that you do, that bring that seed all along and document it. You document it so that you can appreciate it. I sometimes I fail to describe the essence of the single seed challenge because I've been doing it so long and talking about it. But and a lot of people have really latched onto it, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people doing the single seed challenge, and really grateful that they took the time to appreciate a single plant, a single
Yeah.
seed. There's even a fellow here in Houston who is doing the single seed challenge with a second grade classroom, and it's his second year of doing that. And so those children get to see. I mean, they're children. They don't have a garden, but they get to appreciate a single plant. They get to appreciate this project, and I think that's one of the side benefits of the single seed challenge is you can introduce people to gardening and to the beauty of the plant world who aren't normally gardeners, because you can do this in a pot. You can do this on your
Yeah.
windowsill. So that's a little bit about the single seed challenge. And
Now, Gardens Happen has an interesting perspective on this as well. Suggests using the germination test method to start the single seed challenge so you can watch it sprout in a way you can't if you plant it in soil. That may be even taking it to another level where you are actually not only doing everything you just said for the entire life of the plant, but actually seeing the birth of that seedling. That's an interesting idea.
that is an interesting idea I haven't considered, but I think that I might need to consider that because currently I'm on my second start of the single seed challenge, and I'm pretty sure that the second time is also going to be a failure, and I'm going to have to start over. I'm using older seed, and I think that's the problem. The germination rate of this seed is not that good, but I really wanted to have this plant. Um, I might have to choose another seed and get some fresher seed, but that would be a good way to do it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
idea.
And so, I've done some single seed challenge videos over the last couple years, and the way I describe it is very similar to the way you describe it, because it really does draw that focus to the individual plant, and it is that I've always thought that way too. My tomatoes are doing great, or
Right.
last year I chose a butternut squash plant for my single seed challenge, and I had a great year for butternut squash. But when you actually look to the individual plant, I think we generalize our gardens. The garden is
Hmm.
doing great, or the garden is doing terribly, or I can't garden because everything is going wrong. But when you bring it down to the individual plant level, you can really start to identify some of those successes. Like,
Yeah.
wow, my single seed challenge butternut squash plant gave me 3 squashes, and
Hmm.
the one right next to it only gave me 2. And you might not notice those kind of things if you weren't documenting and tracking and paying attention to the individual plants. And so to kind of turn this around, because I know you did videos about this last year as well, because your single seed challenge didn't turn out as well as you had hoped.
Right.
Uh, but it also focuses on when things go wrong rather than generalizing that it was the weather or it was the pests or it was something beyond my control. Because you can look at it from the plant level, it makes it a little bit easier to figure out. Would you agree, at least with your experience last year?
Yeah. Yeah. It was the second single seed challenge for me that was the most useful in that regard. I had a black beauty, black creme. I don't remember. It was a black tomato, and it grew really well. It was very successful. But about the time the fruit was ripening, the plant started to look sickly, and some of the fruit got blossom end rot, and there was a drought. It was, there was watering issues, and I was able to then watch that plant and learn how to correct those problems, and watch that plant recover a little bit. Uh, I could take that information and apply it to the rest of the garden, because I was really focused on that plant in a way that I probably wasn't focused on the rest of the plants and the rest
Exactly.
of the garden. And so that plant became sort of the thermometer of the garden, the litmus test, so to speak. And it was very helpful. And that plant, I saved seeds from it and still have those seeds. But the last couple of years, though, my plants just haven't done well. And this year has been a challenging year, but I'm determined. I'm going to grow a single seed challenge. So I'll be
Good, good.
starting that over this week.
Well, and I think the message that I'd like to, of course, get out, and I know you support this, to all of the others who want to try it, is you're not necessarily trying to choose a seed that's going to do the best when you compare with everything else. You're just choosing a seed for whatever reason that allows you to just slow your gardening life down a little bit and pay attention. And it could be in a pot, it can be indoors, it can be outdoors, it can be a big plant, it can be a small plant. I think a lot of people try, and because I know I've done this as well, you try to do a plant that you think is going to be challenging to grow, and then it doesn't grow, and then you get
Right.
dissatisfied. You could do it with a bean seed or a pea seed that you've grown every year for 30 years, but really change the focus for that plant.
Yeah, that's the whole point. It's what you just said, to change the focus, to change your perspective, and to hone in on one single plant. I have been considering. I've been trying to grow an orange jalapeno, and like I said, the seeds are rather old, and these seeds are probably just not viable anymore. And I'm considering, just like you said, I'm actually considering a bean, a single pole
Yeah.
bean, that I can grow up a pole and just watch that plant grow. Because I know how to grow beans, right? Beans grow here because they're sprouting in the seed packet down here, but
Yeah.
but it's not so much the variety and its difficulty level. It's just that single plant. It's just the act of honing in your attention to that one single little life and appreciating it. So
And something, last year, the reason I mentioned the bean, because last year I thought next year I should do beans. Because as I started watching my cucumbers in particular and some of my pole beans, I'd never really paid attention to the tendrils and how they actually wrap around a pole or how they secure themselves. Because when you just grow a vining plant, you're not thinking so much about that. You put up your trellis, you grow the plant, you harvest it. But to actually see on a day-to-day basis, and you've probably noticed this as fast as things grow down in Texas, that the tendril begins to emerge from the plant in the afternoon as you're out there checking your plants, and the next morning that tendril has attached to something and the plant is growing. And that to me is just fascinating. But if you don't slow down and take the time to see how the plant is growing, you'll never be amazed like that.
yeah, that's true. I had was last year. I had some beans on a trellis. They were rattlesnake pole beans, and I remember doing the video and stretching a net between two T-posts. And I remember saying in that video that it was about 10 inches off the ground, and those plants were just very tiny. And I remember saying, by this time next week, these plants will have found this trellis on their own without me having to do anything, and I'll show it to you. But I came back, like 3 or 4 days later, and they had already found that, and they were winding up there, and those tendrils were like wrapped around, and it was incredible to see how fast that happened.
Yeah.
But if you did just one plant and you paid attention to that plant every day, you'd actually see that process happen. I was thinking, those beans and they're growing well, and then I'd move on and go weed the garden somewhere. But if it was my single seed challenge, I would actually be able to appreciate that whole process of how those tendrils, whip around as they grow until they hit something, and then they coil up on it. It's quite
incredible.
astounding. So,
yeah. Okay, so for everybody out there, and I see lots of comments with people who had misunderstood what the single seed challenge meant, and so I think this has been very helpful, and maybe we're encouraging others. And so this is for any gardener anywhere to just take the time and focus on a plant. But when it comes to YouTube and hashtag single seed challenge 2023, tell us what you're actually hoping for as people take or participate in this.
Yeah, I've had folks ask, can I do this project on Facebook or on Instagram? Well, you can, but kind of the whole point of it is to share videos. It's a kind of a social experiment or a community building kind of thing. There's that aspect of it. If you have a YouTube account, you have a YouTube channel. You may not know it, but you can just Google, how do I use my YouTube channel? And if you have a smartphone, you can take videos, and that's really kind of the essence of it is, or that side of it is that it's a YouTube project, so that we can draw together as a community and enjoy each other's work. There are actually channels that began because of the single seed challenge. And several folks have been real happy that they found this out and found out they had a channel and learned a little bit about their phone and how they could, get a little free editor and put some videos together. There are folks who do the single seed challenge with no editing whatsoever. They just take a video from their phone. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no, that's exactly what I was hoping you'd mention, because you actually could go to YouTube and do a quick search for single seed challenge 2022 and single seed challenge 2021, and those videos will pop up. And so I'm always encouraging people to share their pictures and share their stories, and this is a good opportunity for someone who doesn't think they know enough to do YouTube videos. This can be a perfect way to get started making YouTube videos. And when you go back to what's happened in the past, you see that it's just regular people filming their garden.
Right. And there's folks that don't want to be on camera. They're camera shy, or they're not real confident in that they can present their project on YouTube. And so they're not on camera. They're just showing what they're doing. They're holding their phone in one hand and they're planting their seed with the other, and it's a little shaky and it's a little awkward, but you know what? That's okay. We can still come and enjoy your plant, your single seed. And it can be a confidence booster. It can be something that you see a few videos and you say, well, I can do that. The hashtag, just search the hashtag on YouTube and you can go see what other people have done. You can see the people who are putting up their very first YouTube video ever, and they're not real confident. You can see that, and you can encourage them. You can leave a comment, say, I appreciate what you're doing, keep doing it. That's the beauty of YouTube is we can build communities. And then you can also see those people who've been at it for a while and who can make a polished video, and you can say, well, that's what I aspire to. I want to learn. I can watch that video and basically copy what they're doing. That's how we learn. Basically, learning is just copying someone who does it better than you. Get out there and make a video.
Good. I encourage that as well. Karen's wondering, preparing for a first annual community seed swap, not hosted by me. That's a good way to start. Do you have any tips and advice? So I've done a bunch of seed swaps. I'd say the key is you've got to label what it is, the year, the variety. I've been to seed swaps where people just bring an envelope of seeds and you don't even know what's inside of it. And I don't want to introduce anything like that to my garden. But have you ever participated in a seed swap, either as just going or as donating seeds?
I haven't been to a physical, meetup and swap seeds, but I have swapped seeds with other YouTubers, and with some success. I've sent seeds up to the New England and South Carolina, received seeds from Hawaii, and we've done some seed swapping, and most of that comes from building communities on YouTube. I wouldn't know these people if it weren't for the comment section and there are certain gardeners who do live streams that in the live stream itself, you get to know people, and there's banter back and forth. I can't see the stream right now and the comments.
Oh yeah, this group is great. The comments going back and forth. We've got so many people that know each other as friends through this community.
Yes, and that's how I got a tropical tolerant butternut squash hybrid, or butternut squash, not a hybrid, heirloom that was supposed to do well here, that was vine borer resistant. And I got that from a YouTuber who lives in Hawaii. And I got butternut squash for the first time.
Nice.
So yeah, I like the idea of swapping seeds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, and I would also say, because I kind of ran into this problem a little bit this year, we had a seed swap at my garden club, and I just got so many seeds that I didn't donate nearly as many as I had hoped to, because I just got behind, because they need to be labeled and they need to be packaged.
Right.
But if it's something you're interested in doing, start early, and don't wait to package all your seeds. You can package them and they'll sit for a couple months before you take them to the seed swap. But if you wait until the day before, like some of us do occasionally, then you're not going to actually have as much to swap when the time comes down to it.
The night
So let's
before, that's like me. Yeah.
yeah, there's just always so much to do that it never all gets done. So let's pop back to what we were talking about there in the beginning. And for any of you who have just recently joined us, this is Scott Head from the wonderful YouTube channel, Scott Head. And I've been following Scott for a few years now. I'm in Colorado, he's in Texas, completely different zones. But I think we have a similar approach to how we want to get information out to the typical gardener, which is to share everything, to show the journey, even when it's not working as well as it's supposed to. And so because of the adversity you've had, the terrible weather, all those things, what are you doing differently this year to prepare for what used to be an anomaly, but now might actually be every day?
Right. Well, let me give lay down some groundwork as far as the challenges we've faced. In the past 18 months, let's say the past 2 years, we've experienced unusual weather. We've experienced pestilence, drought, anything that can hammer your garden. We've had it here. We had, I guess it was 2021, the very early part, we had a freeze that took the power grid down in Texas for a week. It was below freezing here, and significantly below freezing. We bottomed out at 14 degrees Fahrenheit here, which is unheard of, but it stayed below freezing for about a week. That killed off my in-ground citrus tree all the way down to the ground. We were able to save it, but the whole thing had to come down to the stump. Killed the garden, but that freeze, we thought down here, well, that's an anomaly. That's not going to happen again. That's a 25-year event. We'll just get back to normal. But that freeze, I noticed in my garden the following spring, and through that gardening year, I noticed different things that I'd never seen before. Different kinds of weeds. Some of the weeds that had been in the seed bank in the soil had clearly been killed off, allowing other seeds that were outcompeted by those that had been killed off to thrive. So I noticed different weeds, which was strange. There's no science I can say behind it. It's just what I noticed in my garden. I noticed different pests that year. We had the same old pests, but we had an abundance of different kind of pests come in, which told me, well, something was whacked in the ecosystem here. Some predators might have been killed off, some whatever. It was very, very strange. We didn't have any bees that spring. So I thought, well, let's just go garden on. But because of the different pests, we had different kinds of, I had cucumber beetles show up in swarms, which we never have that. The one thing that didn't die off was the vine borers. We have those all the time. So anyway, I had all kinds of pests that year. And thought, oh, okay, something's different, but I didn't change yet. And we last year we had a drought throughout the summer, which is unusual. Usually our summers are fairly wet, but we had a pretty significant drought. We had pestilence of insects and bugs that I'd just never seen before. And then come this year, just about a month ago, well, when it was about Christmas time, around Christmas time, we had another freeze, another epic freeze event that is unusual here. And well, I thought before that freeze hits, I'm going to go out and try to save some of my plants. And we did did some videos about it. And we were able to save a few garden plants, but most of the garden got whacked again. My citrus tree, which did grow back and did bear fruit, got knocked it's all the way back to the stump again. I'm going to have to take that thing down all the way to the stump and hopefully grow it again. But now I'm thinking, this seems like a new normal. It's been our normal average spring and summer temperatures around here, but our winters have gotten a lot colder. Maybe not on average, but we have sustained some really, really hard freezes every winter now for the past several years. And it seems to be the new normal. And that has changed how I'm approaching my garden. No longer am I going to put citrus in the ground, which around here was something you could do since I was a kid. You go around the neighborhood and people have orange trees filled with oranges and grapefruit, 30 feet tall that have been there for 25 years. And now you can't do that. It's just too risky, I think. So that changes how I'm approaching my little micro orchard I'm trying to build. And all my citrus is going to remain in pots, going to keep them small, because I can save those if the freeze comes. You take them to the garage. I'm just not able to do that. But it also got me, the big freeze the first time it happened also got me thinking, well, what can I plant then that can take a freeze? And my son said, what about apples, Dad? And I'm like, you can't grow apples. You can't grow apples here on the Texas coast. Well, I discovered that you can. There are lots of varieties you can grow here. There's a nursery that was in California but has since moved to Uganda. They're growing apples in Uganda. And
really?
Yeah, and so I bought from that guy before he moved out of the country. A bunch of varieties of apples that do well here, and this year I'm getting my first harvest. So, and
Nice.
those apple trees took the freeze like champs. It didn't phase them, right? And so I'm trying to adjust what I put in the ground to have a little more cold hardiness than what I normally would grow. Normally you'd think you could grow tropicals here, and you can if you don't get that big freeze. And but now you never know. It's happened so frequently now that it's changed the way we're gardening. With regard to annuals and vegetables in the raised beds, it just means that, well, we're waiting a little longer before we plant out our spring garden. Wait a couple weeks, make sure that there's not some polar vortex up there forming in the Arctic that's going to come down and wreck the garden. So it's pushed things back a little, made us a little more wary. So there's a little change. You got to respond to your environment. I mean, I've always been kind of a climate change skeptic because that's just kind of my nature. But there's something to it. The climate does change, and history shows over time that this earth is an ecosystem that moves in and out of different kind of conditions over time. And so it's made me slow down and say, okay, wait a minute, I need to think this through. Maybe we should wait. Let's just wait.
Well, and kind of tying it back to that focus that the single seed challenge offers. In Colorado, of course, at a garden over 7,000 feet elevation, I've learned this over the years. And that's like tracking things like soil temperature and air temperature and looking at the forecast weather for the next week or two before I put my seeds or plants in the ground. And so, not to say you or anyone else in the south of the U.S. get lazy with their gardening, but it becomes easy. You just always put the seed in and nothing ever goes wrong, where some of the rest of us are tracking those kind of things on a regular basis. And I think it's beneficial for everybody to start tracking those kind of things. It's like you say, you've figured out now that you need to delay, and that delay by a week or two may make all the difference in your gardening year.
Yeah, I appreciate what you said because it's true. Here I've always gardened by the calendar. Oh, this is our average last frost date. That's when we need to have everything ready to go out into the garden. And that's easy, right? You have in mind, okay, March the 1st. That's when our spring garden begins. And you plan your garden, you plan your seed starting according to that date. I plan my videos. Okay, I can't do anything on that week. I got to make videos, Um, but now I have to pay attention to the weather a little closer. Now I have to pay attention to what you said, those conditions. And also now I have to pay attention to the risk of different pests and kind of plan my seeds that way. I need to buy varieties and cultivars that are resistant to these new pests that have arrived. And I've got to treat my garden beds a different way. I've got to plan not to bring up new seeds in the weed bank. My garden's a weedy mess half the time, and but now I've got all these new weeds. How do I prepare the soil each year so I'm not encouraging weeds and feeding or bringing up new seed? And you got to think about a whole bunch of variables now that I didn't have to before. And
now, Red Hen Spun and Woven is asking, does anyone have any suggestions for trap crops to avoid, mitigate insect adversity? And so weeds play into this a certain degree when we're talking about the pests that come to your garden. But have you looked into trap crops as part of your approach?
Yes. In fact, I discovered some excellent trap crops for aphids. Cowpeas. The aphids the cowpeas are an aphid magnet. If you're growing cowpeas to get cowpeas, usually they can push through. But as a trap crop, the cowpeas are excellent. This past fall, I grew. I'm trying to remember what the plant was. It was a brassica. Rutabagas. Rutabagas seemed to really attract. There was a particular kind of caterpillar I had in the winter. I had caterpillars, but I could clearly see that they preferred this particular plot of rutabagas, and they left my other brassicas alone that were on the side. Not a single caterpillar in it. They preferred that. So I didn't even bother to treat them. I'm like, okay, you can have the rutabagas, and they stayed there.
Yeah,
so
I've done that with turnips. Turnips can be a really good trap crop for a lot of plants. And for aphids, I like to use nasturtiums.
Oh yeah.
I don't grow them as much as I used to. At the greenhouse at the Galileo School, I had nasturtiums growing at the doorway to the greenhouse, and they were the trap crop. They would trap everything coming into the greenhouse, and they were very effective for aphids. I haven't used them. Wormulus is wondering about nasturtium for cabbage moths. I'm not familiar. I haven't used them for cabbage moths, but I've seen, again, things like turnips and also parsnips and rutabagas for cabbage moths. I've noticed that they tend to attract those kind of insects as well.
Yeah, trap crops are an interesting idea. I've sworn off squash for a few years because we have so much pressure from the squash vine borer moth that I never get. And I'm specifically talking about winter squashes that require a longer summer season. We can get a quick spring crop of summer squash before the borers show up, but they overwinter in the soil. Their pupa, I actually see them when I dig in my garden bed, and I know they're here. And the pressure is just too much. People suggest, well, why don't you put a cover over your garden to exclude the moth? Well, they're already in my soil. So I'm going to give it a few years before I try that again. But what I found was when I grow multiple varieties of squash, the borers tend to prefer one or two out of those varieties. And so I can leave those as a trap crop and hope that they complete their life cycle and move on, or lay their eggs and go down in the soil before that one variety that they didn't prefer produces fruit. And so,
that's a good tip. I think a lot of gardeners, especially new gardeners, may try one type of pole bean and one type of squash, and that's the way most of us get started. But once you have the space, if you want to grow squash, I do the same thing. I'll grow 3 or 4 different types of squash because I never know if there's going to be a pest or a weather event that's going to hammer one of them. I'll always have something else to at least harvest.
Yeah, yeah.
And so KP is saying to remind you to keep records on La Nina and El Nino. Those of us in the middle of the country are well versed on El Nino and La Nina, and I've used that in some of my garden planning. Have you incorporated some of those patterns? And for those of you that don't live in the United States, these are air flows over the Pacific Ocean, and they pick up the heat or cool air from the ocean, and then it flows over the United States, and then it affects the weather patterns, and they tend to follow a cycle between the La Nina and the El Nino. But it does have a factor I've noticed in the middle of the country. Have you taken this into any of your planning as well?
No, I haven't. Mainly because usually the effects of those weather systems aren't significant here until now, until they are, So I will have to begin paying attention to that. What we generally pay attention to in terms of global weather patterns are, has to do with hurricanes. We have to deal with tropical storms and hurricanes, and those are not just garden wreckers. Those can be home wreckers. So,
Oh, sure.
so that's more the weather focus for us. Beginning in June, July, all the way through September, we're always watching. We're watching Africa at that point because that's where our storms come from. In fact, I remember it was 2008 September, and I was watching the weather and the hurricane predictions, and there was a storm that was just on the coast of West Africa, and I was like, "Ooh, that one's ours." And I was just kind of making a silly prediction to my wife, and that one came through right our backyard. Man, that was a blistering storm, Hurricane Ike. So yeah, we're watching those bigger patterns out there. But in terms of gardening, yeah, I think that's something I need to pay attention to a little more. I'm not sure how it relates to our weather here, but that's something I need to learn.
Yeah, just add it to your record keeping and see if you can notice some trends. This is one of those things for serious gardeners. It's trends over years and years. And so we were talking about delaying the season after the last frost date. I've lived here in Colorado for 26 years now and have been really focused on gardening for about 22, 23 years. And that's when I really started keeping track of the patterns. Mm-hmm. And I recognize that I can't put things in on my last frost date because it's just too early. And I always give it a 2-week buffer. That's what I talk about in my videos. And that's from having tracked it over a period of years and figuring out what the safest goal is to put plants in. And for me, it's 2 weeks after the last frost date, just from my own garden. But I know people, particularly in California, for instance, where I used to live, they're looking at the last frost date as just a date on the calendar, and they're putting in a week or two before the last frost date for the same reason, because they live in one of those microclimate regions that they're never going to get a frost after a particular date.
That's wild. I noticed I was doing a video on zones, and I did notice there. I'm in zone 9A, and I looked way up in the Washington coastal area. There are pockets of zone 9A up there, and it's because of a microclimate. They live in a valley or they live right next to the ocean or something. And I was amazed. It doesn't really have to do with how high up you are in the country. It has to do with your what is the lowest average temperature you experience during the winter? I think.
Yeah, the average lowest temperature over a 30-year period.
Right.
And so, like for instance, this year I recorded a day at minus 17 Fahrenheit. That's about minus 28 Celsius. And that's lower than what my zone 5B says. My zone 5B says that on average, it's minus 15. Well, the whole point is it's an average. So one year it's going to be minus 17. Another year it might be minus 10. And And so when you look at it over a period of years, it's the average lowest temperature. And it only takes one day to determine what the average lowest temperature is. And I've only had one day that was colder than -5 this year, -20 Celsius, and it was that cold. And so, it's a guideline for how we approach gardening, but someone across the street literally can be having completely different conditions. That's why we need to track everything that we can.
Well, also there are plants you can put out early that can take a freeze. I put some onions out, some springs. I've got some spring crops out there, but I know that they can handle the freeze. There are things out there that you can plant. You just have to go plant by plant. But for those wonderful spring and summer tomatoes and peppers and things like that, no, forget it. I'm waiting a few weeks now.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's see. There's a question. Oh, here, Green Side Up is saying, "Nice to meet a new Scott. I have his channel logged for viewing later." And Green Side Up has a nice channel as well, and looks like they had to head out, but it's nice that we're exposing more people to you, Scott. Rachel's saying, "I heard it said that bindweed and morning glories are the same plant. I want a good vining plant and bought morning glories. Should I avoid them?" They're not necessarily the same plants, but they are in the same family. Do you grow morning glories by any chance?
I did once, and I'm never going to grow morning glories again because they've become a weed now.
Yeah.
We also have a native morning glory here. It's a beautiful vine. And if it grows in a place where it's not hurting anything, I let them go. But they've managed to find their way into my raised beds, and those are some of the seeds that pop up every year, and they strangle everything they get on. They'll completely take over any plant they grow in. So I try to eradicate them as soon as I see them.
Yeah, the morning glory flowers are bigger and more colorful than the bindweed, but once they get established in the garden, they can easily take over. I've seen a few other people commenting on the same thing. Rooted Heart Garden is saying that they're so invasive. And so if you've got one of those nice English gardens where you're out there and you've got the pathways and the beds and a gardener and someone who can weed constantly, morning glories might have a place in a garden. But for most of us who are focused on a lot of other gardening plants, it can easily take over.
Even if you grow them in containers, they can easily they drop their seeds, and they can drop them outside of your container, and then it's done. You're gonna have morning glories forever. I grew a variety that was a beautiful blue and white flower, about as big around as a coffee mug, and I still have them coming up. And that was like 8 years ago when I first planted those in a container, and they're still coming up around that area where the container was. The birds will get in there and pick at those flowers and spread that seed around, and the seed pods will drop, and it's just a mess. So yeah, if you have staff, that would be great.
Go for it. And so Thomas Jessen, no reason to apologize, is asking a question about watering. Has an IBC 1,000-liter tank and wondering about submersible pump or external. And I saw Tony from Simplified Gardening was on, and I know he's got some of these big IBC tanks. If he's still on, he can help pose some questions on this. And so do you, I'll get to the specifics of this in a second, but what is your primary method for watering your garden?
I usually water by hand with the hose. I just stand out in the heat like a chump and water with the hose. But
I don't think that's being a chump at all.
Well, when it's 100 degrees outside, you probably should shift your watering to the morning or evening. But excuse me, I during the drought this past year, because we had a lot of family tragedy that happened, and I wasn't able to get to my garden as much this past summer, I just got one of those back and forth sprinklers. And I know you're not supposed to water tomatoes and get the leaves wet and all that. It encourages, mildew and mold and disease, but I didn't have that opportunity. I needed to just put the water out there and turn the water on for half an hour or so every other day. And so that last year, that's how I watered my garden. And of course, that doesn't get the whole garden. So we lost a lot of plants due to the drought, but normally I just water from a hose, and our water quality here is fairly decent, but did plan on a water collection system, and I began work on it last year. Again, work in the garden had to come to a halt in many ways, and this took low priority. But I did put a bucket, a 55-gallon drum under my downspout, and I prefer to use that water now when we have it, and water with a watering can and just go around the garden and water my plants that way. You can also do your fertigation that way with a watering can. It's easy. It's easy. I like to use fish emulsion and fish-based fertilizers on my tomato plants throughout the growing season. And that bucket of water sitting by the side of the house really is convenient.
Yeah.
It has a benefit also not having the chemicals that the city water has, but I've been using the chemical city water for many years, and it's just what I have to use. Sometimes
I
it's
have to use it too.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to accept. When you're setting up a big system like a big tank, and you have to have a pump, ideally, I would say if you could set it up with as much gravity feed as possible, that's the best way to approach it. Because if the electricity goes out and you're relying on the pumps for your garden, just like you were talking about with the oscillating sprinkler, if you can't get the water to the plants, they're not going to make it. So you need to have that backup system if the pumps fail. But as to whether you have a internal or external pump, I would suggest to use whatever's easiest to maintain. I had a big tank with a submersible pump at the greenhouse, and it was all fine and dandy until the pump went out. And so now you got to pull the pump out of the water and try to fix it and put it back in. And I ended up going with external pumps just because they were easier to manage and easier to maintain.
Yeah, when I do not run any kind of pump system right now, but when I was a young man, I worked for my father's pump and compressor company, and I was a certified pump repair guy as a young kid. This was way back, but the engineers always said never put a pump submerged if you don't have to. If there's a good compelling reason to submerge it, like you have to, you have to stick it down into a refinery, stack or something, because you have to have it down there. That's really the only reason, because man, I tell you, when we would have to pull pumps that were submerged, it was nasty. It was hard, and you had a whole set of variables that you didn't have if you just had an external pump.
There you go. A pump expert. Glad that you substantiated that. That's great. So here's a interesting question from B Purple Poker. What's your opinion on the future of gardening, as far as are we as gardening community doing better than we were in the past?
That's interesting.
I think we are overall. I think I've been gardening for decades now, and just started as a hobby, and of course it's become much more than that for me. I like to look at this community here, and you see it when you do your live streams. You've got your community that pops in, and so I think there are more communities of gardeners that are developing, and we're all recognizing that we're all in this together. A lot more positive support when it comes to it. I think there is that section that's getting into it for reasons we may or may not agree with, to grow the food for fear, for whatever it is that they're getting into gardening. But I'd say overall that as communities that we're doing better. I see more support in the gardening community now than just 5 years ago.
Yeah, I would agree. People tend to think of the good old days and the golden era, think the past, and we think of the good things in the past. We don't think necessarily of the challenges that they had to overcome in the past. We can learn from the past and some of the practices. There was a show that the BBC did about a 16th century typical homestead, where they had historical reactors live there for an entire year and only use that technology they had. And I learned some things about gardening that I didn't know. I learned some things about building an orchard I didn't know. But they had challenges we don't have. We have a water hose. We got city water. We have the internet. We have the communities on the internet. And I like you said, I think the internet itself along with all of its, risks and dangers, but it's one of the greatest tools we have. You can get on YouTube and learn anything these days for free. You can get
Yeah.
on YouTube and learn how to garden. And like you said, Scott, we have our favorite little communities within the YouTube gardening community where we make actual acquaintances. I don't know, you call them friends or people you never met before, but you actually meet people and get to know people, and there's that back and forth learning that goes on. And like you said earlier, there's those seed swaps that go on, and sometimes you actually meet gardeners that you know online. And I think there's a real strong case to be made that we live now in the gardening golden era, and it's only going to
Nice.
get better. Um,
Nice.
and that's what I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. And you and I are both striving to try to make that even bigger and better. And so I hadn't really thought of it as a golden era, but I would second that. I think we are moving in that direction. So good, I appreciate it. Urban Chicken Mama is asking to explain a little bit about watering and why bottom water. When it rains, it's not bottom watering. I don't ever have an answer. And so I would throw out that it depends on what you're watering and where you're watering it. When I'm starting my seedlings and I've got my pots in my grow room, I'm doing bottom watering because I want the roots to grow down. And it's a common tendency in most of our gardens that we don't water enough. And so the roots stay shallow at the surface. And the bottom watering indoors encourages a longer root system. But outside, we can't bottom water. We can only water from the top. And so we have to rely on gravity and the water draining down to the roots, which is why it needs to be sufficient to get down to the root level. Mm-hmm. And so what would you add or change as far as doing any bottom watering? Or because you're talking about doing like the your citrus in pots. Have you thought about how you're going to irrigate your containers in a changing garden?
No.
Okay.
I don't bottom water the potted plants so much, but I do use a reservoir at the bottom to hold water down there to encourage those roots because of our extreme heat. In a pot in my area, you have higher temperature soil because you have that soil heating not just from the top, but it's not insulated around the pot. And so that solar energy is heating that pot up, and the water evaporates out in no time. So it pays to have a reservoir at the bottom, but I don't fill that reservoir. I just water and let that reservoir fill up from the top.
Yeah.
So, but like you, I do my seedlings from the bottom. In fact, I just watered my seedlings from the bottom about an hour and a half ago. So
Good. Yeah, I gotta go do that when we're done here. I've got actually did some transplanting yesterday. I had started some tomatoes early and a couple peppers that I'll be growing in my new hydroponic system, and transplanted them yesterday. So it's kind of fun because I'm still about another month, a little more than a month away from getting most of my tomato plants started. But absolutely, they've been bottom watered as part of this part of the growth cycle. James Patterson says you make some great cooking videos, and I had some cooking videos. I think this is a great way for both of us to show the gardening community what to do with the things that we grow. So what's some of your favorite things that you've either made a video about or you're planning to do a video about when it comes to cooking your garden harvest?
my favorite video of using the harvest was making kimchi in the traditional Korean way. And I followed one of the famous Korean YouTubers. I followed her recipe, and it was awesome. It turned out great. But funny you should mention that, James. The video that's doing the best for me right now is actually how to make sauerkraut. It's a cooking video, and something on the algorithm picked up that video, and it's got over 1 million views just in the past 4 months, 4 or 5 months. That video, not even a gardening video, is somehow and there's controversy in that video too, because I made some mistakes that the real strict fermenters are all upset about. The controversy sells on YouTube. So You know,
My sauerkraut video is honestly one of the main reasons that I became a YouTube creator.
oh yeah,
I was a master gardener almost 20 years ago, and then I became a master food preserver. And then I thought, oh, I'll make some videos. And one of my very first videos was how to make sauerkraut.
that's
And
great.
then life overtook me, and I stopped making videos. And then one day I went back, and this is about 9 years ago. My sauerkraut video had 100,000 views, and it's
Wow.
like, wait, what? And so that got me focused back into the idea that there is an audience for
Mhm.
things like that. Now, my sauerkraut video just went over 1 million views last month, but it took 10 years to get there.
Yeah.
So I'm impressed that yours hit 1 million so quickly.
Yeah. Something picked it up, and it must have been shared in some fermenting community or something. I don't know.
That's
But
nice.
yeah, but I
But
do
it's good.
I do like cooking videos. They don't obviously perform as well as the gardening, the main subject. On YouTube. You need to stick to your lane, stay in your subject matter. YouTubers who try to make it by doing all different kind of videos and are all over the place generally don't succeed. I mean, you might enjoy doing that, but yeah, you build an audience chiefly with one subject. But I consider using your garden and cooking to be, in the same lane. I
Yep.
that's what we're doing. We're growing food. So how do you eat the food? So
Yeah. What I found with my videos, my worst performing video is how to make zucchini bread. Um, for that, and it's a great recipe. And I show harvesting my own zucchini and making bread, but nobody watched that video. And same thing, like as you've seen, the cooking videos don't do as well. But what I found is doing a video about something like my shishito peppers and how great the shishito peppers are, and then throwing in a little bit of cooking at the end of that video. That way, we can try to get the word out to as many gardeners as we can to start cooking some of the stuff that they like to
Mhm.
grow. And thank you to that super sticker to Steph C. Thank you for that contribution and donation. I always appreciate it. Nice to have you here. So glad you can enjoy it. Francis is saying in Canada they freeze everything. So that's one option. Will It Grow is saying, did you know that Scott Head is responsible for at least 5 new YouTube gardening channels? Starting up mine is one of them. So I didn't know that you could track yourself to at least 5 channels. I suspect that there's more than 5 channels that you've had a role in being responsible for. Partly
Yeah,
is the single seed challenge.
I remember John starting his channel up there. Will It Grow? He's the guy I was talking about in New England that I've received seeds from. We've swapped.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, there's a lot of others and here as well. A lot of the regular viewers are starting to make more and more videos, and I just think it's like you said, if you've got a YouTube name, you've got a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
If you've got a YouTube channel, then you can start uploading videos. And you don't have to approach it like Scott and I do, where we're now on a schedule and we're doing videos because we've got a big channel and we're really trying to promote gardening to a large audience. It's okay to just have 3 subscribers and 12 views and just make the videos because you want to do it as a hobby. And I kind of got started partly from just logging what I was doing in the garden through my YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I was too lazy to pull out the garden journal and write everything down. It seemed easier at the time to just take a video camera and film what it
Right.
was that I wanted to log and then make a video about it. So get out there and make videos.
Yeah, that's how I started too. I have this compulsion to teach. It's just something about I've always, back in the dinosaur days, I had like 20 blogs on different subjects. Just I like to teach. And that's why I started with my iPhone, just making videos back in 2014, and didn't think, didn't expect to become a YouTuber or start, actually making money with YouTube. But when that happened, that added another, YouTube sent me a letter and said, hey, you're now eligible to monetize. I'm like, wow, that changes your thinking. You're like, well, now that will hold me accountable. If I start getting paid, that'll hold me accountable that on days when I'm lazy and I don't really want to get out there and in the heat and do something, well, there are people out there who appreciate and give me their time, basically,
Yeah,
that I really kind of owe them some consistency. So yeah,
that's good.
yeah,
Yeah, I kind of feel that compulsion as well. That if I don't make that video, I'm letting somebody down, or
yeah,
there's a gardener that needed that information that is not going to get it, and now they won't become a gardener.
yeah,
It's a false sense of guilt, but it does help keep the motivation going.
yeah.
Yankee Sista Homestead has been a wonderful part of our community here, and she just recently went over 1,000 subscribers.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
And so I'm glad to see you back here on Monday, as I always am. And so it is one of those things that it starts off slow. We had communicated back and forth once she expressed that she had an interest in developing a YouTube channel, and I shared some insight, and then she sent me a note excited that she hit 1,000 subscribers. And it's
That's
those
great.
nice little things that happen in the YouTube world that really make a big difference when you
Mhm.
cross those thresholds. It is a lot of fun.
And I actually follow. Well, I think we're all subscribed to dozens and dozens of gardening channels. I'm subscribed to hundreds of them. But I have my favorites that I watch every video they produce. And
Hmm.
some of those videos or some of those channels that are some of my favorites, they have 700 subscribers, or they're tiny. They're not even on the radar, so to speak. But I like their content, and I like the people. Um, there are gardening channels that have, you know, a million subscribers out there. Not a whole lot of them, but there are some out there. But I don't have a connection with that person, so I don't watch those videos, even though that is one of the main gardening channels out there. I just don't feel the connection with the
Yeah,
style, maybe, or the personality. So sometimes, it's not about how big you are. It's
right.
about the quality of your. For me, it's about, are you an honest gardener? So
And I haven't seen him. I've been looking for it. I haven't seen him checked on, but Jordan Marie Organics has been a regular viewer recently, and they just started making videos, and they're up to 3 videos. I watched the third video yesterday. It's
yeah,
fantastic. It's
awesome.
incredible, and and it's actually doing better than the other two. The other two were just beginning, but Jordan Marie is his just adorable 2-year old daughter, and it's a wonderful channel. It is one exactly like you're saying. It's one of those kind of channels that I look at and I can relate to, and they're making an effort and they're gardening, and he's got kids in the garden, but it's really some good information and some good videos. So shout out to Jordan Marie Organics, and it's one of those channels I think a lot of people would enjoy watching the videos, and I hope, and he's planning on making more videos. He's just getting started, but I think he's got the bug, and once you get the bug to make the videos, it's hard to stop. Oh,
Jordan
and Orty
Marie.
just says Orty Killer just subscribed to you, so, or maybe that's just subscribed to me. There's 2 Scotts, so whichever Scott it is, or both, thanks for
Mhm.
subscribing. So, and Gardens Happen looks like they just subscribed. So now Jordan Marie Organics is up to 23 subscribers. So that's awesome.
Awesome.
So,
I'll go
uh,
check
it,
them out too.
it, yeah, it's fun. And, it's funny because I've been planning to do a video on how to make raised beds using those concrete blocks you get at Lowe's or Home Depot, and then you just
Mhm.
slide a board into. And been on my list of videos to make for a couple years now, and that's the video he did, and he did a great job showing how to make a raised bed using those materials. And
Awesome.
so that's what, yeah, exactly. That's why I think it's just so great to encourage people, because you have ideas and I have ideas. We just don't have enough time in the day to make all of the videos we'd love to make. So if someone else can make those videos to help people out, it's also better.
And you don't have to make a video that's unique. All of us gardeners basically make the same videos. Um, you know, how to grow tomatoes or how to build a raised bed. I mean, we all have them, and I even make the same videos over every year just to have a fresh take on it. So you don't have to worry that I don't need to make this video because there's too many of them out there. No, do your take on it. Some people will watch your channel because they like you. So
Yeah.
I try to encourage new YouTubers just to get out there and just document what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. It looks like Jordan Marie Organics is here today. They're going to be releasing a new video this afternoon, so
Awesome.
that's fantastic. So you guys are gonna if you're gonna fall in love with Jordan Marie. It's just that simple. And she actually has a speaking role from time to time, so it's also a lot of fun. Ladies Garden and Home says, so grateful to both of you for encouraging me to create my channel, and you're very welcome. And I think encouragement for all of and yeah, I'm a big YouTube channel, and I know a little bit about gardening, but I need that encouragement just like everybody else. And so to see a video and try something new because someone else shows me that they can do it, I'm constantly, like you said, you're subscribed to hundreds of channels. I'm constantly watching gardening videos to get new ideas on how to garden.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We don't know it all, so you got to learn somewhere. And like I said earlier, YouTube is free university. You can learn anything on YouTube.
Absolutely. And so I'd seen a video earlier asking about your or not a video, a comment earlier. I was trying to track it down, asking how your dog's doing.
My dog?
Yeah.
My dog Phoebe is like a mainstay on my channel, and there's like a whole cult following of my regular viewers who love my dog. My dog blew out her knee. Was it early last year, or the year before? And she had to have surgery on her knee. I'm the kind of person who is like, if a dog costs more than $50, $100 to care for, it's not a human being. We don't do that. When money's tight. But the vet said the surgery is going to cost $5,600, and I'm like, wow, I don't have that. Well, my daughter encouraged me, why don't you do a GoFundMe and let your community know and see if anybody wants to pitch in. And I'm like, I don't know about that. And she said, you need to just do it. So I did, and I put a video out to my community, and within 24 hours, the surgery was completely funded.
That's fantastic.
I was so grateful. I was so amazed. And when I cut it off because it was already funded, people got angry. They were like, we were about to come and give you even more, right? And so anyway, so Phoebe, my corgi, had the surgery and she recovered. That leg is doing well, but the doctor said expect her to blow the other one because now she's going to be favoring the other one. We had to change her lifestyle. She's no longer zipping around the backyard because of that other leg. We didn't want that one to blow out, but it kind of has. So she's kind of gimpy every now and then. She doesn't run much anymore, so she's gotten plump. But she's very, very well. In fact,
good.
I got a text in the middle of our live stream. My wife said she's not doing well right now. So I don't know what that is. But overall, she's doing great. She's living her best life. Good. And she gets Employee of the Month every month. So
that's good. That's good. Well, and I know I like seeing her walk through or on or near the garden because she does play a role in a number of your videos. I don't necessarily make a point to exclude Mala from my videos, but she's constantly photobombing when I'm shooting. So I just have to be selective at which shots I allow her to stay in. But that's another one of those things about the gardening community. Overall, very supportive of our animals, our family, all those aspects. And that's why I asked about Phoebe, because I'd seen that video you'd done, and I knew that you had just a huge support from your gardening community.
Yeah, I don't know what it's about, what it's like, but every time Phoebe's in a video, not just walking in the background, but like she's coming to sniff around what I'm doing in the ground or gets gets up close. I got comments. People are like, "Wow, I love your dog," and how's Phoebe doing? And she's really become quite a character. So I like to kind of play it up too.
Yeah. At one point, we lost Lily last year,
Mm.
and she actually had both rear knees replaced. She blew out one knee chasing a fox, and then not sure how she blew out the second knee, but we went through all of that, and of course it's hard to go through that whole thing. But
Yeah.
she went years, I think 8 or 9 years on artificial, well, not artificial, just the surgery that they did on the knees so that she could walk, and just did fine. And so when she started slowing down, she was appearing less and less in my videos.
Hmm.
And it was nice to have people ask about her from time to
Yeah.
time, even when she's not there. And I was thinking of doing a contest at one point, as how many of my videos is there a dog in? Because often all you see is just the nose pop up from the bed, or
Hmm.
you see the ear walk by. And I realized most of my videos actually, I know where to look, but there's a dog hidden in the background,
Yeah.
because they are part of your gardening. They're always hanging
Uh-huh.
around when you're outside.
Yeah. I enjoy having my dog in my videos. It's funny. Phoebe actually blew her knee out on video when I was
Oh,
making a gardening video, but I didn't put it in the video. But she was chasing the water out from the water hose, and how in the early days before she did this, she was on my videos all the time, jumping up and trying to catch that water. But that's how it happened. So somewhere on a backup drive, I've got that video.
there you go. Tammy saying, watch you both. And Scott Head, I watch because it's been a drought, different methods and perspectives. So you're having an impact on viewers, and I think kind of to tie it back to what we talked about earlier, the assumption that just because you're in zone 9A or 9B, that it's going to be easy compared to those of us that are in 5A or 5B. But you've definitely got your own challenges, and by showing them, obviously, like with Tammy, you're making a difference to help other people who might have some of those same issues.
Yeah. I do like to watch videos of other gardeners in different areas. I watched one gardener in Saskatchewan who has 100-day growing season, and that's a challenge. That would be a challenge for me to live with. But I watch her, and I learn from her.
Yeah,
I think it's we learn broadly that we learn best.
absolutely. Tasha is saying, can you use seeds that are past the expiration date? I don't want to throw out seeds. And yes, absolutely. Most seeds will last past the expiration date. The date that is put on a lot of packages is often targeted around 90% germination viability. And so if it drops below that, they'll say, don't plant these seeds, buy new seeds. But I've got seeds that are 14 years old that are still germinating, and I'm still saving them. You can do a germination test, of course, and Jay, I'm sure will pop this up in a second. I've got a video on how to do germination tests and check your seeds and how long seeds last. But I don't worry too much about that. Do you, Scott? I don't even know that I look at the expiration date on a seed packet anymore.
For me, I've discovered that some seeds it matters more than others.
Sure.
Like my single seed challenge this year, I believe those seeds are just long expired. There's the germination rate's no good with those. I probably get one if I keep repeating it over and over. But and that's a jalapeno pepper. You'd think a little hard, dry seed like that would last almost indefinitely, and sometimes they do. But we have high humidity here, which is not real helpful with seed storage. And as try as you might, it's a more humid environment, and I'm not sure, but I think again, I like to make sure that I'm not putting out a fact out there if I don't know it's factual science. But I suspect that the way I store my seeds affects the viability of those seeds a bit.
Oh yeah, it will.
Yeah, but like larger seeds, beans and squash seeds. I mean, I've had seeds that are 10 years old that I've planted and they come up just fine.
Yeah.
So,
and Wormulus raises a good point, because there's only a few companies that will actually put an expiration date on their seed packages. But it is required, at least in the United States, that all the packages should have or are supposed to have a date on it. and that's the date that's packaged. And especially some of these larger companies, they're doing germination tests on every seed they're getting, but they're not saving their own seed. They're getting seed from all over the year, all over the world. And so those seeds will come in, they'll be tested for germination, then they'll be grown so that they can take pictures to put on the seed packet, and then they'll sell those seeds. And so some of the seeds might be packed in 2022, but they might have arrived at the seed distributor in 2021. So we're getting a lot of seeds that we might think are fresh, and they might already be a year or two old before we even buy them. And then, we're told that they're only going to last a year. Well, the reason that we're told that is because they might be 3 years old by the time that we decide we're going to save them beyond the season. And most seeds really can exist beyond that. And what you're doing, I think, is exactly the right way to do it, which is try them. Don't throw them out. See if they're still good, and if they're still good, grow them.
Scott, if I may, I appreciated your seed packet video recently, and I like, there was one company that I don't know that you featured, but there's one company that I like that they put the seed germination rate on the package, and they tell you when they tested that germination rate, and I appreciate that. But I actually bought seeds from a company that you featured on the seed packet video, and it was a company I'd never used before, and I bought the seeds just because they had information on the inside of the packet as well as
botanical interest.
Yes, and they were beautiful, and I just wanted to see those, and so I bought some seeds from them.
Oh, good. Well, and you may not know this, but Kevin from Epic Gardening now owns Botanical Interest.
Oh yeah. Wow.
And so that just happened last month. He did a video about it, and they released a news release. And so I had already had that video planned. I'd already filmed the video, and then I found out that, and Kevin actually mentioned in a comment to me.
That's great. I bought a raised bed from him.
Yeah, there you go. And so wonderful that the company Botanical Interest is actually just up the street from me here in Colorado. And another one of those, I've been planning a video to go up to Botanical Interest and get a tour of the factory or their plant and talk to the people and make a video. And then the video that Kevin released the information that he bought the company is a tour of Botanical Interests. And of course his video, he got access, and it's way better. So now I've had to cross that video off my list because he's already done it probably better than I can do it. I'll probably revisit that in a year or two, but it really is a wonderful company, and those seed packets really are pretty incredible.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, and Tony from Simplified Gardening is saying he has such big plans for it. So you're talking about your beds. You can now buy those beds through the Botanical Interest website. And so Kevin is really starting to incorporate a lot of those gardening interests that he's been involved in, and Botanical Interest is just the latest. So it's one of those things. Riverdale Garden says, one of my favorite seed companies. So I've been enjoying them. I will say for Botanical Interest, and I mentioned this in the video as well, if you've got patience and you've got the time and you can track a company like that, look for the sales. So for instance, I bought my Botanical Interest seeds this year and got some free seeds, but I had to pay for shipping. If I had just waited another week and a half, I'd have got free shipping on my seed packages. So that's another one of those things to enter into your garden journal, is when the different companies have their sales of different types, and you can save yourself some money in the long run.
It's a good idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and because there are other companies that I'll order from because I know they run out of seed, by the end of January. So I got to get in December or January to order my seed. So it's one of those kind of things to keep track of all of it. Shandy's Garden says, I love it that I watch so many YouTube creators that I know all of these people that are everybody you're talking about. This is truly a big family. So that's awesome.
That's that community factor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the? We talked about the single seed challenge. We talked about some of the things you're going to be doing differently today. We're getting close to the end of our time. What's the newest or biggest or thing you're most excited about this year as we move into this next season?
Apple trees. I'm
Okay.
absolutely a fanatic about apple trees. My wife is just almost sick of me always talking about the apple trees. I'm out there looking at them every single day, and I think I'm just really excited about these apple trees because they're new to me. They're going into their third spring in my yard, and they're succeeding. I'm getting my
Nice.
first fruit right now. So I'm excited about that. But as a gardening subject, that's a very narrow subject matter to be doing YouTube about because there's not a lot of people out there growing small apple trees in their backyard in the
Right.
subtropics. So I know that there's a small bit of folks that like to watch those videos, but I like doing them because it's fascinating. These trees started out as about a 12-inch tall rootstock, bare root, and the fella at the nursery grafted a 1-inch piece scion wood he
Mm-hmm.
called them bench grafts because he made them with a device on his bench. Every single one of those, we ordered over 100 of those trees through my son for people in our congregation, my church congregation,
Oh
and we
wow.
split them up because he had a minimum order. But so I got like 6 of these trees, and they all we watched that graft succeed. It grew, 5 feet tall the first year and started branching out the second year. We apple tree. Everything in the world wants to devour your apple tree. They're labor intensive, but they're enjoyable. You have to prune them a certain way. You have to shape the branches for optimal fruiting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just really excited about that. And I know not everybody is, but that's what makes me
Well,
happy.
I hope to see you making more and more of those videos. I agree with you. I did a video on how to plant bare root trees because I was planting my apple trees, and I did a
Mhm.
video on how to prune fruit trees because I was pruning my apple trees. And and you're right; those aren't videos that are going to be viewed by a ton of people, but it's all part of the gardening journey.
Yeah.
And it might encourage someone to try apple trees in Texas, which is unheard of.
Yeah. In fact, one of the varieties I'm growing was actually developed right here in Houston. So hopefully, they'll thrive here. With growing apples, just here I go. I'm ranting about apples again. But in the subtropics, the apple tree does not behave like it does where it's supposed to grow. You throw out chill hours, throw
Right.
out all the early, mid, or late season. You just have to watch these plants and watch how they react and watch how they fruit. But they'll fruit for you. It's just not the
Nice.
same. You have to kind of learn your plants as they grow.
Cool.
But
Cool. Well,
it's fun.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the videos about that. And thanks to Liz at the Mixing Bowl Homestead. Thanks to both of us for the help we offer those new gardeners. And thank you, Liz, for being here and that contribution to help us go in the direction we want to go. And I thank you as well, Scott, for being here today and sharing your information. Anyone who is new to the Scott Head channel or didn't know the Scott Head channel is there, I put a link in the description below, so definitely check it out. And your audience is steadily increasing, and I still watch all your videos. I don't always comment on the videos like I may have in the past, but
Sure.
I'm still watching, like the herb video that you just came out with. So if you're interested in herb gardening, check out Scott's latest video, and you can check out the herbs or the
Yeah, that's
herbs
a
that
that's a
grow.
good one for someone who's just starting gardening. So
There you go. Well, I'll let you go and have the rest of your day, Scott. It's always nice to see you. Always nice to chat, and hopefully you've got some new friends as a result of the show today.
thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, pleasure. Okay, so let's go ahead and say thank you to Yankee Sister, one of my favorite people to say thank you to. Amazing guest, amazing live. Grow, preserve, eat. Until next Monday, may you all be blessed. Happy gardening. Thank you for those kind words, Yankee Sister. And I will, of course, say the same to all of you as you start the rest of this week. I hope it's a great gardening week, and I hope to see you here next week. Have another guest next week, someone you may not be familiar with. So join me, same time, same place, same gardening fun. And I'll enjoy the week that I can if you enjoy the week that you can. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.